The 60s weren't just about flower power and rockets to the moon. It was also the decade when filmmakers threw out the rulebook and built sci-fi worlds that were equal parts bold, bizarre, and brilliant. Forget the obvious titles everyone brings up. These are the movies that still feel fresh today. So, which forgotten experiments turned into timeless gems? Stick around, because you're about to see just how wild 60s sci-fi could really get. The Damned, 1963. Here's a movie that proves Hammer Films wasn't only about gothic castles and monsters. The Damned starts like a rough British biker flick, rowdy gang leaders, seaside chaos, and a brooding young Oliver Reed. But suddenly, it swerves into pure science fiction. Hidden beneath the cliffs of Dorset, scientists guard a group of eerie, pale-skinned children raised in total isolation. The shocking twist? These children are immune to radiation, bred to survive a nuclear future the rest of us never could. Director Joseph Losey, an American exile blacklisted during the 50s, brought a razor-sharp sense of paranoia and unease to the story. He frames the children not as villains, but as haunting symbols of what humanity might become if pushed to the edge of survival. The contrast between rowdy bikers on the surface and the cold, clinical bunker below makes the film feel like two different worlds colliding. Filmed against moody coastal landscapes, The Damned captures both the beauty and menace of its setting. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it. It was marketed awkwardly as a crime thriller and barely noticed. But modern viewers recognize its genius. Its mix of youth rebellion, Cold War dread, and heartbreaking innocence makes it one of Hammer's most daring productions. The real sting comes in the final act, where the children's fate leaves you unsettled long after the credits roll. The Green Slime, 1968. If you think the 60s were too serious, let me throw The Green Slime at you. This Japanese-American co-production is a riot of flashing lights, wailing guitars, and rubbery monsters that still manage to creep under your skin. The story? A team of astronauts destroys an asteroid on a collision course with Earth, only to bring back a microscopic hitchhiker that grows into glowing, tentacled creatures. Soon, their space station turns into a fight for survival. Director Kinji Fukasaku, who later became famous for gritty crime epics, pours pure energy into the film. The monsters are cheesy by modern standards. Men in suits with dangling tendrils. But the way they swarm in groups creates genuine tension. Combine that with one of the catchiest, wildest theme songs of the decade, and you have a movie that refuses to be forgotten. The production design is just as wild. The Gamma 3 space station is a neon playground of control rooms, docking bays, and strobe-lit corridors. It feels like a disco spaceship long before disco even arrived. American star Robert Horton tries to play it straight, but when he's shouting at writhing green creatures while psychedelic guitar riffs blast in the background, it's impossible not to grin. Critics mocked it at release, but The Green Slime earned a second life as a cult favorite. It even inspired one of the earliest episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Love it or laugh at it, this film is 60s sci-fi at its most colorful and chaotic. Woman in the Dunes, 1964. Not all sci-fi needs flashing lights and space monsters. Sometimes, the scariest future is one you can't escape. Woman in the Dunes, directed by Hiroshi Teshigahara, is part science fiction, part existential nightmare. It follows an entomologist who wanders into a remote desert village. Trapped by the locals, he's forced to live with a mysterious woman inside a sand pit, endlessly shoveling sand that threatens to bury them alive. Sounds simple, but the film transforms into something larger, a meditation on survival, identity, and the crushing weight of routine. The sand itself becomes the villain, shot in dazzling close-ups that turn grains into waves, avalanches, and walls. You can practically feel it sticking to your skin as you watch. Critics outside Japan didn't know how to classify it. Was it art house drama? Was it allegorical science fiction? Either way, it stunned audiences. The film went on to win the Special Jury Prize at Cannes and earned Oscar nominations, a rare feat for such a strange, claustrophobic story. Its lasting influence is huge. Later survival thrillers, from Cube to The Martian, owe something to the suffocating tension built here. The message lingers too. Even if you escape the pit, are you ever truly free from the traps life throws your way? Woman in the Dunes isn't just worth watching, it's unforgettable, haunting you long after the last frame. The Angry Red Planet, 1960. Welcome to Mars like you've never seen it before. The Angry Red Planet hit theaters with a gimmick called Cinemagic, a process that bathed the Martian surface in a surreal red glow. It wasn't perfect, critics joked it looked like crayons smeared over the lens, but it gave the film a dreamy, otherworldly feel that audiences hadn't seen before. The story follows a group of astronauts landing on Mars, only to discover bizarre creatures and hostile landscapes. There's the giant amoeba with a rotating eye, the bat-rat spider crab monster that has to be seen to be believed, and a planet that feels alive, ready to spit them out at any moment. The effects may look pulpy today, but they carry a handmade charm that CGI can't touch. Director Ib Melchior once again proved he could stretch a small budget into something memorable. The cramped spaceship interiors add to the tension, while the Martian vistas feel like a fever dream. For kids in drive-ins during the 60s, this was unforgettable nightmare fuel. What makes it stand out now is its sheer creativity. It's not scientifically accurate, but it doesn't need to be. The Angry Red Planet captures the sense of wonder and danger that defined the early days of space exploration. It's campy, it's colorful, and it's exactly the kind of offbeat gem that keeps 60s sci-fi alive today. A Trip to the Moon, 1962. Yes, you heard that right. The legendary Georges Méliès, short from 1902, had a bizarre 60s revival that turned it into a whole new experience. In 1962, a colorized and rescored version of A Trip to the Moon hit the underground art scene, complete with psychedelic music and a groovy atmosphere that made the old classic feel shockingly fresh again. Suddenly, a silent short from the dawn of cinema became a trippy centerpiece for counterculture screenings. Why does this matter? Because it proved that sci-fi history doesn't die, it reinvents itself. Méliès's whimsical rocket in the moon's eye moment suddenly spoke to a new generation dreaming of space travel while experimenting with the limits of art. Film clubs and universities embraced it, projecting the reissue alongside light shows and jazz riffs. What had been quaint in the 1920s was radical in the 1960s. The rescoring added layers of strangeness. Some screenings even paired it with live bands, making it feel like part of the era's experimental cinema wave. The updated version influenced avant-garde filmmakers, reminding them that cinema could be playful, surreal, and cosmic all at once. Of course, purists scoffed at tampering with a classic. But that clash of perspectives is exactly what made this reissue fascinating. It wasn't about erasing Méliès's magic, it was about rediscovering it in a new cultural moment. Watching it in the 60s was like traveling back to the birth of cinema while also peeking ahead at the space race and the psychedelic future. That's a rare kind of double vision. The Terronauts, 1967. If you've ever wondered what would happen if a bunch of everyday scientists got yanked into deep space without warning, the Terronauts has your answer. This Amicus Productions oddity follows a group of radio astronomers who suddenly find themselves transported to a strange alien base, where they're tested for survival by an advanced civilization. Think of it as The Office meets a cosmic escape room. Amicus was better known for horror anthologies, but here they dipped into sci-fi with a mix of charm and clunkiness. The budget was laughably small. Sets were cobbled together from leftover props, and the alien designs looked like they came from a craft fair. But here's the kicker. The story actually works. The blend of humor, suspense, and big ideas makes it feel like an overlooked Doctor Who adventure stretched into feature length. The film bombed on release, and critics dismissed it as bargain bin pulp. But over time, fans have grown fond of its scrappy energy. It embodies the try-anything spirit of 60s sci-fi, where ambition often outweighed resources. And sometimes, that raw ambition is exactly what makes these movies endure. Today, The Terronauts is remembered not as polished cinema, but as pure fun. It's a movie that dares to ask big questions about humanity's place in the universe, while still giving you goofy robots and space puzzles. For fans of quirky British sci-fi, it's a treasure waiting to be rediscovered. Battle Beyond the Sun, 1962. This one has one of the strangest journeys in film history. Originally a Soviet space epic called Nebo Zoviot, it was re-edited for American audiences by none other than Roger Corman. But he didn't stop at dubbing. He hired a young Francis Ford Coppola to splice in new footage of ridiculous space monsters battling like cosmic wrestlers. The result? Battle Beyond the Sun, a Frankenstein of a film that feels half Cold War parable, half drive-in oddity. The original Soviet version was a serious, patriotic story about the space race, highlighting teamwork and sacrifice. The American cut? Total chaos. The pacing is uneven, the edits are abrupt, and the added monster fight is so rubbery it borders on parody. Yet that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. You're watching two clashing ideologies stitched into one movie. Film historians love to debate whether Corman's alterations ruined or revitalized the original. In truth, both versions are worth watching. The Soviet cut is sincere and technically impressive for its time. The American version, meanwhile, became a cult curiosity and a stepping stone for Coppola, who would of course go on to make some of cinema's greatest epics. Battle Beyond the Sun is proof that 60s sci-fi wasn't just about sleek rockets and bold visions, it was also about experimentation, reinterpretation, and sometimes outright cinematic chaos. The Human Vapor, 1960. Leave it to Toho Studios, the company behind Godzilla, to give us one of the strangest sci-fi thrillers of the 60s. The Human Vapor tells the story of a man who can transform his body into vapor, slipping through doors and walls at will. At first, he uses his powers for petty gain, but soon he spirals into obsession, convinced he's above human morality. The real twist is how the story treats him, not as a monster, but as a tragic figure. Director Ishiro Honda mixes noir-like moodiness with sci-fi spectacle. The vapor effects, achieved through clever smoke machines and double exposure, are surprisingly effective even today. Instead of rubber suits or giant beasts, the film relies on atmosphere, dark alleys, shadowy interiors, and the unnerving image of a figure dissolving into mist. What makes the Human Vapor stand out is its melancholy tone. Unlike most sci-fi villains of the era, the protagonist isn't purely evil. He's driven by loneliness, longing, and the hunger to transcend human limits. That complexity keeps the story compelling, even when the effects show their age. Though it never became a global hit like Godzilla, the film has gained a reputation among fans as one of Toho's most experimental entries. It blends horror, sci-fi, and tragedy into something that feels closer to a cautionary tale than a monster movie. Watching it today is like opening a time capsule that reveals just how ambitious Japanese sci-fi could be in the early 60s. The Creation of the Humanoids, 1962. Imagine a post-apocalyptic Earth where humanity has dwindled, and androids known as humanoids are slowly taking over. That's the premise of The Creation of the Humanoids, a film so talky and philosophical it feels more like a stage play than a drive-in flick. But here's the thing, beneath the low-budget sets and stiff acting lies one of the most thought-provoking sci-fi scripts of the decade. The humanoids are designed to serve humans, yet they begin developing emotions and a sense of identity. The central conflict isn't about explosions or laser battles, it's about what it means to be human. The film dives into themes of prejudice, evolution, and coexistence decades before mainstream sci-fi tackled them. Andy Warhol reportedly loved this movie, calling it the most chilling of all science fiction films. And you can see why. The stripped-down sets, gray makeup, and clinical dialogue create an unsettling atmosphere that lingers. It's not flashy, but it gets under your skin. At release, most audiences dismissed it as too slow, but modern critics reevaluate it as ahead of its time. It asks questions that echo in today's debates about artificial intelligence. If a machine thinks and feels like us, does it deserve the same rights? The creation of the Humanoids might not give you action, but it will give you ideas that stick with you long after the credits. In 60s sci-fi, that's pure gold. The Atomic Submarine, 1960. Before outer space dominated the decade, filmmakers turned to the deep sea for their mysteries. The Atomic Submarine sends us into Arctic waters where American crews hunt a mysterious craft sinking ships. What they discover isn't a foreign power or natural phenomenon, it's an alien presence lurking beneath the waves. The underwater sequences, filmed with miniatures and clever lighting tricks, still hold their charm. The claustrophobic submarine interiors intensify the tension, giving viewers the same sense of confinement the sailors feel. While the monster, design, an enormous glaring eye, is undeniably pulpy, it works as a striking image of an alien intelligence probing humanity. Director Spencer Gordon Bennett, who came from serials and B-movies, knew how to pace his story. He kept the suspense tight, balancing action with eerie, quiet moments of sonar pings echoing in dark water. The Cold War undertones are obvious. Paranoia about hidden enemies, the fear of annihilation, and the idea that the real danger could come from anywhere, even below. Critics at the time brushed it off as just another monster flick, but the film actually laid groundwork for later underwater sci-fi like The Abyss and Sphere. And for a 60s drive-in feature, it packed a surprising amount of atmosphere and dread. The Atomic Submarine might look dated, but its mix of claustrophobic tension and cosmic mystery proves you don't always have to go to space to tell a good sci-fi story. Sometimes, the scariest frontier is just below the surface. The End of August at the Hotel Ozone, 1967. Now here's one you probably haven't stumbled across unless you dig deep into Eastern European cinema. The End of August at the Hotel Ozone is a stark, black-and-white vision of a world destroyed by nuclear catastrophe. It follows a band of young women wandering through desolate landscapes, searching for food, shelter, and maybe the last remnants of civilization. The film's power lies in its raw minimalism. There are long stretches without dialogue, only wind sweeping across abandoned buildings or footsteps crunching through empty fields. When the group stumbles upon an elderly man at a rundown hotel, the clash between youthful survivors and fading remnants of the old world becomes the film's emotional core. Shot with documentary-like realism, the movie feels unsettlingly authentic. There are no flashy effects, no futuristic gadgets, just bleak survival. It's closer to a sociological study than a conventional sci-fi adventure, but that's what makes it so unforgettable. It imagines not just the destruction of cities, but the slow unraveling of humanity itself. At its release, audiences in Czechoslovakia reportedly found it too grim, while Western critics barely noticed it. Today, it stands as one of the most haunting apocalyptic visions of the 60s. Its DNA can be traced in later post-apocalyptic cinema, from Mad Max's barren wastelands to the grim realism of The Road. If you're looking for a movie that gets under your skin with sheer atmosphere, The End of August at the Hotel Ozone is a chilling masterpiece worth rediscovering. Latitude Zero, 1969. Imagine a utopian city beneath the sea, run by a benevolent scientist locked in eternal battle with a villain commanding mutant creatures. That's Latitude Zero, a wild Toho production mixing submarine adventure, sci-fi fantasy, and comic book melodrama. It's part Jules Verne, part Saturday morning cartoon, and entirely 60s in its ambition. The story follows three men rescued after a crash and taken to Latitude Zero, an underwater paradise powered by advanced technology. But paradise has enemies. Dr. Malik, a mad genius with a flair for the dramatic, unleashes mutant bats, giant rats, and all manner of bizarre creations in his war against the utopia. The production is nothing if not bold. Sets are sprawling, costumes are colorful, and the special effects carry that unmistakable Toho charm: miniature submarines, rubber monsters, and elaborate explosions. American actors like Cesar Romero, yes, the Joker from Batman, appear alongside Japanese stars, giving the whole thing an international flavor. While critics at the time dismissed it as silly pulp, fans now see it as a hidden gem. Its earnest commitment to spectacle makes it irresistible. And beneath the camp, there's a surprisingly hopeful message about cooperation, peace, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. Latitude Zero might not be high art, but it's a perfect slice of 60s sci-fi fun. It's the kind of movie you watch with a grin, marveling at how far imagination can go when budgets are stretched and creativity runs wild. The Wizard of Mars, 1965. This one wears its influence on its sleeve. The Wizard of Mars is essentially The Wizard of Oz, reimagined on the Red Planet. Instead of Dorothy and Toto, we get astronauts stranded on Mars, encountering bizarre landscapes and mysterious figures as they try to find their way home. Directed by David L. Hewitt, the film was made on a shoestring budget, and boy does it show. The sets are often desert landscapes with colored filters, and the Martian creatures are strange but endearingly awkward. Yet, the movie's charm lies in its ambition. It takes a familiar story structure and plants it in an alien setting, creating something oddly hypnotic. John Carradine lends gravitas as the voice of the all-powerful Martian wizard, even if his role mostly involves looming speeches and eerie presence. The rest of the cast struggles against the low production values, but the sincerity shines through. The Wizard of Mars never broke through to mainstream audiences, but it became a cult curiosity. Its mixture of myth, sci-fi, and surrealism foreshadows later experimental works that blurred genres. Watching it today feels like flipping through a forgotten comic book brought to life. It's clumsy, it's odd, but it has a sincerity that keeps it from fading into obscurity. For anyone curious about the stranger corners of 60s sci-fi, this one's a must-see. Colossus and the Amazon Queen, 1960. And finally, something completely different. Colossus and the Amazon Queen blend sword and sandal adventure with light sci-fi comedy. Two hapless men land on an island ruled by Amazons, only to find themselves entangled in a matriarchal society that flips their expectations upside down. It's less about gadgets and aliens and more about exploring cultural clashes through a playful, exaggerated lens. The production design leans heavily on bright costumes and exotic sets, typical of Italian cinema of the era. The humor is broad, the action is staged with gusto, and while it's not groundbreaking, it's a fascinating example of how 60s filmmakers experimented with genre mashups. Though not as well known as Hercules or other peplum films of the time, Colossus and the Amazon Queen stands out for its sheer oddity. It shows how the sci-fi label stretched in the 60s to cover not just rockets and robots, but any imaginative departure from the ordinary. Modern viewers might chuckle at its campy dialogue and over-the-top performances, but that's part of the fun. It's a time capsule of the era's playful side, reminding us that not all sci-fi had to be serious or apocalyptic. Sometimes it was about spectacle, laughs, and sheer entertainment. Colossus and the Amazon Queen might not change your life, but it will make you smile, and in the end, that's worth just as much. So there you have it, 15 more 60s sci-fi films that prove the decade was bursting with imagination, even outside the usual classics. From underwater utopias to desert pits of doom, these movies remind us that bold ideas matter more than perfect effects. Which one will you track down first? Drop your pick in the comments, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. After all, the strangest treasures are always hiding in plain sight.